Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhamman Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. All right, so enlightenment is one thing, self-improvement is another thing. They overlap in areas that are of great interest to American people. And so two people who are new to Buddhism, they look just alike. What could possibly be the difference? But there is a difference. So first I'll go over how they are on the same trajectory. For self-improvement, well, people are going to have different ideas of what that is. I'm just going to kind of choose some sort of generic Western American California idea of what is self-improvement. So as I understand that, self-improvement would be, well, creating a bigger, better self. A self that's not weighed down by all kinds of negativity, such as doubt and various afflictions of ill will and so forth. And self-improvement would be, walking through the world with more poise and finding, beautiful ways to be in this world. One's interactions would become much more smooth over time. And what else was self-improvement? You just more and more like the angels, you're just better and better. So enlightenment is a trajectory of overcoming the darkness of ignorance that would support any of the negativities and that would cause any kind of craving or clinging whatsoever. The Buddha said that monks, I do not, even as a little bit of poop stinks, I don't praise even a moment of becoming. So the path to enlightenment is a radical stepping away from anything that is weighty whatsoever, and then even anything that's not weighty as well. So instead of a bigger, better self, you're deconstructing what's here to understand that there was never a self to begin with. And see what really is here and now, so that there's no temptation to grasp. You just see what's actually here, like, okay, well, why would you grasp that? It's like if you've been carrying around a backpack full of gold and silver and, antique things that are just, incredibly valuable. And then somebody pulls one out and says, well, actually, that's just a rock. Like, oh, okay, I can get rid of that. And so you pull out another one. Oh, okay, that was just a rock too, but the rest of it's gold and silver. And you're carrying it around. It's just so weighty. Your arms are weighed down. Your back is breaking. You pull another one. I know that one's really, actually, that's just dirt too. You just keep going until you realize, oh, I pulled 1,000 things out of this backpack. And none of them were gold or silver or beautiful, wonderful antique things. Actually, it was all dirt and mud and rocks and yucky stuff that I never wanted, actually. I think I'm just going to toss the whole backpack. I don't believe there's any gold down in there at all now. But to get anywhere towards insight, then we first have to clean up our act. The Eightfold Path is a rough, well, it's a great guide, but we can just look at it as a rough guide at the moment. First, you have to hear some teachings to understand anything about cause and effect. And then first step, just at least get a little bit of wisdom about cause and effect. Karma at least applies, you know that. And that what you do really matters. Each moment is a springboard to later moments. So it really does matter. Body, speech, or mind, anything you do, it does matter. And the right intention, second step of the path. That gives us our compass. Intentions of non-grasping, non-hate, non-cruelty, open-hearted letting go, loving kindness, compassion. So we got our compass, and then we want to treat the world as though what we do matters, and as though what comes around goes around, or goes around comes back around. So that means that we want to be completely harmless to other beings, as much as possible, step by step, bit by bit. Okay, so that's steps 3, 4, and 5. Right speech, right action, right livelihood. And then step 6, 7, and 8. Step 6 is working with the mind to shift out of unwholesome states into wholesome states. 7 is about right mindfulness. 8 is about right stillness or concentration. So all of this is very, very supportive to developing a mind that's capable of insight and has the conditions for insight to arise. So to even become capable and create the outer supports. And it's not just sequential. I mean, it starts off sequential, but this greater stillness is supportive to better right understanding, even maybe eventually come to understand the Four Noble Truths of how this whole mind-body experience fits together, or dependent origination, how the whole cycle fits together. And with that, then our compass is going to be much more precise. So as we keep doing this, we start getting more and more clear about what is and isn't here. First of all, in the meditations that we're doing with right mindfulness and right stillness, in our meditations, we get more and more sensitive to what the mind is up to. The more sensitive we get to what the mind is up to, the more we can cut off some of the aggravations of the mind. We can start to sense them when they are just about to kick in, before they even manifest in words in our own minds. So you're just about to develop a resentment towards your roommate, and you feel it. You can feel like this heaviness or this weightiness starting up in the mind, or sort of like sensing clouds on the horizon. You just realize, oh, this is what my mind is about to be up to. Or you can feel some melancholy coming on, or you can feel some grief coming on. Like you can just feel your mind starting to look for trouble. And I'm not saying that happens right away, and I'm not saying it happens consistently. It is a training. But when we're getting into that, we're starting to figure out some of the tricks of the mind and not fall for them. You might be sitting around completely miserable and then go thinking and realize that all the misery you've just been having for the last 10 minutes or so was just a compilation of ideas, thoughts that you were churning and turning into more complex phenomena. You're turning the thoughts into you're turning the thoughts into a thought pattern that the body's reacting to. And then you're taking the bodily reaction, you're feeling the negativity of that into more thinking. Your mind is picking up the painfulness of the body reaction, the painfulness of the train of thought. Then the mind is more excited, it picks up more. And we can make ourselves crazy. A person who is not actively training their minds, or beyond training of their minds, sitting alone in a room is in a dangerous situation. Being alone in a room is, what do they say? When you're lost in thoughts, it's like being lost in a bad neighborhood. So we start to really understand the inner terrain of the cause and effect of the mind. Step 6 is incredibly powerful. I've gone over it a few times with all of you here, I'm pretty sure. This business, the 4 parts of preventing unwholesome states, overcoming unwholesome states, developing wholesome states, and maintaining wholesome states. Knowing what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, taking your stronger wholesome states, weaponizing one of those or more of those in against your negative states. Not suppression. Suppression is not really going to work in the long term. Maybe, during a meditation or something like that, but not in the long term. But this is about skillfully redirecting, retraining our minds. So this whole eightfold path, the import, the intention behind all of this, well, I mean, it's going to actually vary with the individual, but as presented in the early texts, the import isn't to make you a better employee. It's not to, just help you overcome anger and live longer because you're not stressing out your heart so much. It's not just to get better relationships. It's not just to be a better citizen. All of these things do happen as a side effect, very wholesome side effect. They're like signposts along the road that say, yes, you're going the right direction. Yes, this is good. You're getting a lot of positive feedback because from your world, from other people, and inside you can just know yourself that, oh wow, what used to take a provocation at a level of a 2 for me to blow up and be all upset for a while. Now it would take a provocation to a level of 7 for that to happen. And even so, at a provocation of level 7, I'm just making up these numbers. I'm not really talking about some particular lore, but let's say there's a really strong provocation. Even then, one is not going to hold on to it the way one did before. And in fact, one can even do some self-analysis and find, oh, this is where I was mistaken. Even though they're 99.9% wrong, these other people who did this and that, I can see that little bit that was mine that enabled me to get caught up in it in some way. So we're also getting empowered and all this. I mean, all of this good stuff is happening. Good signposts along the road. But ultimately, that's not the final aim in Buddhism. It's not just about getting better. It's not just about getting happier. Yes, those are important. And I don't put anyone down who is in this just for those purposes, just to be happier, just to be less angry, just to be able to sleep at night better. This is all good stuff. But there's more to this. And I really do think that stopping there to just, where you're not getting so angry at people and you can sleep better, stopping there is like finding a big rock that you're using as a door jam. What's the word? Like a thing to hold your door open, and then not realizing it was actually gold. That actually happened. I must have heard this in my youth and tucked it away somewhere. I've been giving it as an example, as a metaphor for years. Coming across Buddhism and just using it for these lesser purposes is like finding gold, a big chunk of gold, and using it as a doorstop. A kid actually did that outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, around 1799, something like that. And this whole area turned into a gold rush. It was the first gold rush in the States, if my history is correct. And I was not consciously aware of that story whatsoever. It's only in the years since I started this place, moved back to Charlotte, started this place, and I researched my hometown anew. I went, wait, what? You mean this really happened? So using Buddhism for these other purposes, it actually works. I mean, you can use a huge chunk of gold as a doorstop. I'm sure it's quite effective, frankly. It'd be better than, some big mud clump that would, crumble and leave little crumbles everywhere, or maybe iron that would be heavier, or it would be effective. But there's something else you can use it for. Here, if we understand things the way the Buddha was talking about them, we're stuck in a cycle. And all the downsides of this life are just a taste of what's out there in samsara. And so there's this really bad news that, life doesn't stop just because you get happy for a bit in this life, but rather life goes on, life after life after life. Not 1 or 2 or 10 or 20, but we're talking the endless numbers, millions, billions, trillions. To where, as I mentioned recently, every other being on this planet has been your mother at some point, because we've just been mixing and matching so thoroughly for so many, many, many lifetimes. And another school of Buddhism has picked that up and refers to other sentient beings as mother beings, all mother beings, to be respected, which is really sweet. But again, that's, the Buddha was trying to scare us. He was trying to say, look, this has gone on long enough. If you understand this, that's enough. Like, you don't have to suffer anymore. Let's do this thing. Let's actually really do this thing. So there's more than one approach. The basic outline of really doing this thing is to have all the background work done of, working this whole Eightfold Path, but then also really going for some deeper meditation. And it's best done in retreat situations, certainly at least until we've, gotten familiar with the deeper meditation states. Hard to do it the first times in one's own home. But to go on to meditation retreats and really, in our day-to-day life, there's a certain kind of a tension and vigilance that's here, that when we go into a more protected setting, focused very much on the meditation together with the Buddhist teachings, we can relax. And there's this relaxation allows us to silence the inner chatter more deeply, not just for longer moments without it, but like at a deeper level of silence. And in that deeper level with that deeper level of silence, truth can just be there right in front of us. So we have all kinds of revelations along the way. Revelations about how this mind is doing its nonsense again and again. Revelations about things like, your Four Noble Truths, they're suffering. At some point it might hit you in meditation that, the mind's waywardness, suffering. That's just part of the First Noble Truth right there. Here it is. So then the next time the mind moves, you're like, yeah, First Noble Truth. Yep, First Noble Truth, there it is. Again and again. We start to see that, this whole storyline of who I am is a timeless quality to whatever's going on with this being, that all those stories just kind of fall away. And then there's just this timelessness, not a permanent essence of self, but a timelessness of what this mind does and what the whole mind-body experience is like, that is not really, that makes all of our identities and duties and normal day-to-day life kind of irrelevant to the real work that needs to be done. So the real work isn't just, softening our rough edges so that everybody will like us better. That's part of self-improvement. And we can self-improve our way all the way to heaven. It really can happen. But heaven's a temporary place as well. It's a wonderful resting place. It's a lot better than landing in hell or lower realms. It's an awesome place, but we can do better than that, because it's still just a temporary landing place. Like the difference in if you were, taking buses and walking, from this metro to that metro and then the next bus, and you're trying to get across a really large city to home. And You can find a park bench to sit on. You could even maybe rent a hotel room for a night, or you can have places to land, but always you got to keep moving, You're not home yet, but then you get home. And what we really want to do is go home. And again, it's that that home is in the mind that has seen everything so clearly and completely that it's not fooled by anything anymore at all. Some people refer to it as our true home. It's home in the sense of a metaphor. It's not home in the sense of a permanent abiding. It's more like all the effort doesn't have to be done anymore. Like one of the metaphors for Nibbana is they've laid down the burden. They've done what had to be done. There's nothing more for them to do. And just close your eyes for a moment and imagine that if you've actually done everything you ever needed or wanted to do, like it's all done. No more homework, no more job, no more like it's done. Like a kid throwing down his backpack because it's summer now. It's done. Self-improvement goes on forever. There's always another rough edge. There's always a little more you can learn about sensitivities of other people and improve. There's always a little more you can learn about how to interact with people and not upset everybody. There's always more that you can learn about, habit patterns of speech and thought that really are not all that acceptable. There's always more you can learn. With enlightenment, there's a shortcut. You don't have to fix this thing. You just don't have to take responsibility for it anymore because you're done. You're done improving it. You don't have to keep renovating this thing and make it, this ultimate perfect being. It can continue to have a bad, stupid sense of humor, and that's okay. You could just say, I'm done with it. Like, I don't need to keep renovating this project. I'll just live with it. It still annoys people, but I'll just live with it. It still says the wrong things, but I can just live with it. So there's, and again, I'm not claiming to be finished in this path, but the enlightenment comes in stages, and I have met people who have told me their first stage of enlightenment moment of dawning story, and it's very credible. This is really it's really doable. And what I understand is that what I've heard is that some people, having done the Eightfold Path, walked it, worked it, done it, probably in past lives too. Not to exclude anybody here. If you're interested in this stuff, you probably got it. A good background in past lives of Dhamma work. But there comes a moment, whether deconstructing analytically this whole mind-body experience, seeing it as, through looking at the sixfold base, or looking at the five aggregates, or looking at the elements, or looking at the 32 parts, or some other approach of seeing what really is, and actually, more importantly, what isn't here now. Somebody might have a great breakthrough in terms of anicca, impermanence, seeing the rising and passing of phenomena, seeing how, that which is supposed to be yourself is just so unstable, and your mind even more unstable than the body, to where it just seems absurd to call anything self. You just see how it's all processes. Wow, did they ever stop? Nope. Dang. Rising and passing and nothing in between. And then there's seeing it in terms of suffering. So that would be different people would see it in terms of suffering. To see that as long as everything is changing and you're hanging on to any of it, Not good, because you just get hurt. It's like if your heart is set on a thing, then when that thing breaks, your heart breaks. So there's nothing worth hanging on to, because you're just going to get hurt. Not in the shut down kind of, you know, wounded person sense. I don't mean like that, but just with the wisdom, saying, you know, this, everything is changing. And so everything that's changing, when clung to, it's going to burn, it's going to hurt. So let me not cling to anything, because why would I do that? I see that it's changing. And then other people would see it in terms of anatta, non-self nature. That, okay, well, the liver isn't me, and the heart isn't me, and the lungs aren't me, and like this isn't self, and that isn't self, the skin isn't self. Okay, I don't see any self in the body. Okay, well, what about the mind? All right, so, are my memories self? Well, they keep changing. Well, what about my perceptions? Well, that keeps changing. Well, what about my intentions? Well, that's about as unstable as it gets. Well, what if, like, well, okay, but where's the me? Well, keep looking. Okay, keep looking, but finally going, I don't see it. I just don't see it. I don't think the Buddha was trying to create a philosophy, a theory of non-self for you to embrace and act in accordance with it. I think the Buddha was trying to show us a doorway. And so seeing non-self is another doorway. That a person could have that first stage of enlightenment dawn. And so so I just said it a moment ago, but I'm just gonna kind of belabor the point for a moment. There's no end to self-improvement. There never is. The fully enlightened being can continue to self-improve. They can continue to take in the data of, oh, if I do this, these people will be unhappy. If I do that, these people will be unhappy. So let me be more gentle and kind in these ways. Like there's self-improvement doesn't end. But enlightenment has a specific end, a specific goal, and people reach it, and then they're done. Out of compassion, they can continue to work on themselves, but they don't have to, because they're already done. So there are some delightful, to me, very delightful stories in the scripture, and certainly in the commentary. I'll have to think whether there are any in the early Buddhist text, the EBTs, but certainly in the commentaries there are stories of arahants who people found completely unacceptable. So there's one that's very dramatic story of, he has a really long, complicated name. It comes up sometimes to my mind, it doesn't other times. You might come back. This monk was going around calling people outcast. And people were deeply, deeply wounded and offended that he was calling people outcast. And the Buddha said, don't, they took the issue to the Buddha, like, this monk is doing this. This is terrible. You got to make him stop. And the Buddha said, you know, he was a Brahmin for 500 lifetimes. It's just a habit. He has no evil intention in this. It's just a habit. Can you imagine how well that would go over in today's context? The entire Buddhist world in America would be absolutely convinced that not only is this person not enlightened, they couldn't possibly be enlightened, and we're going to have to scorn them and put them down to make sure everybody understands how unenlightened they are. I mean, there'd be a lot of bad karma in that. If what I'm saying is true, that perfection in Buddhism is perfection of the heart, to lack great hate delusion, to lack any kind of ignorance about the nature of the mind, nature of reality. It doesn't mean perfection in any other way. And so actually enlightened ones could, in theory, be very annoying. So there's an old saying, you can't tell who's enlightened, but you can tell who isn't. That's only true with very basic ethics. Beyond basic ethics, no, you actually can't. There's so there's that story about that arahant. There's another story. I'm not sure where this one is. It's in the commentary somewhere. That there was a man who was sent by his wife to get a really truly great elder, not just some generic monk, but a really truly great elder from the Buddhist monastery to do some kind of ritual at their home. And she had prepared a very great feast. The husband and wife had a great feast prepared, and they had a very valuable gift prepared for the monk. And the man, you can't just ask for who you want at the monastery, at least in those days. Ideally, you cannot do that. That you just have to get whoever is there, whoever they assign you. So he gets assigned a monk, and he's pondering, oh, I really hope I got a good monk. I hope I got a good monk. I hope I got a real arahant, not just some learner. And he's carrying the monk's bowl as they're walking to the man's home. And they come to a ditch. And, the road is washed out here and there. It's not like paved like our roads here. So there's a washout in the road. And the man, being very well-mannered, he stepped down, very dignified, into the ditch and up the other side. And the monk leaped across it like a monkey. The man was so disappointed. Oh, I've got not only do I not have a great old, a great wise elder, I've got some fool. He's pondering, dang, I was really hoping for a good one, and I've got this idiot. They come to another washed out place. This time it wasn't so wide, so the man, very dignified, stepped over it with a bit of a hop, and the monk climbed down in it and up, climbed back up the other side. And the man says, that's it. What's with you? What is wrong with you? To the monk. And I said, oh, well, when I jumped over the first ditch, you had the thought that you wouldn't, the man had the thought that he would give him the meal, but he's not going to give him the gift. So the monk says, you had the thought that you'll give me the meal, but not the gift. And I thought, I better not do that again, because then you would decide not to give me the meal too, and that would be terrible karma for you. The man handed the monk the bowl, bowed down to the ground all the way down, begged forgiveness, took the monk's bowl and said, come, venerable sir, and took him. And so later the story got back to the monastery, and the monks were sitting around talking about it. And the Buddha comes in and asks what they were talking about, and they told him, and then they said, Lord, why did he act like this? Why would an arahant do this? And the Buddha said, oh, well, he'd been a monkey for 500 lifetimes, so he leaped across the ditch. There's another story where, oh gosh, so many stories. Let me think. Think of one that's really direct. Okay, so let's say a monk, it is not really all that unusual. I'm not going to say common, but it's not too unusual that when people have done a lot of meditation, some kind of unusual abilities might manifest. And there are these cases in the scriptures of really great psychic powers manifesting. Now, I don't know about that, but it's certainly common in the scriptures to read of this. Very, very common in scriptures. There was an arahant monk who, okay, let me back up. So if somebody's an arahant, they have good judgment, right? If they have good judgment, they would be able to do an action but think about it and say, okay, but it's going to have these and these effects. So they would not do anything that would cause trouble, right? Like you would expect that of an arahant, right? Okay, so remember what perfection is. Perfection is perfectly free of greed, hate, delusion. That's all it means. Perfectly free of greed, hate, delusion. Keep it in mind, because it doesn't mean perfect good social judgment. So, as we've seen with that other story. And this story is actually, in the Vinaya. So it's not one of the really kind of scruffy ghost story, angel story kind of books that are considered apocryphal. So a king offered to get an attendant for a monk, and the monk accepted it. He was out in some wilderness area, and the king forgot. And then he one day went, oh, I was going to get an attendant for that monk. How many days has it been? They told him how many, a minister told him how many days. He said, okay, give him an attendant for every day I forgot. So a village sprang up in the wilderness by where this monk was living. And so now he would go on alms round to this village, but it's a very poor village. And I would just assume, I'm just reading into it, but I would assume it's not a natural place for a village. So of course they're poor, right? And it would have been all these attendants, but, you know, together with their families. So it's actually a village that has just popped up in the middle of nowhere. And the monk would go on his alms round, taking his begging bowl, you know, something kind of like this, you know, walk along house to house, and people put food in the bowl, and that's what he eats. And one day a little girl was weeping. He's like, oh, what happened, little girl? And she was crying because the other little girls had some kind of little bracelet or necklace or some sort of bangles. And they were just so incredibly poor in her house. They had nothing. And he said, okay, well, take those flowers that are there and, you know, do this and this with them. So she made a little crown of flowers, and she put them on her head. And then he just used his psychic power and turned it gold. And she was very excited. Like, wow, because it's like the best ever, because it's got that incredible detail of real flowers, right? Like can you imagine? Like it's like the best workmanship in the world. So she's got some jewelry now. Okay, great. And he goes along his way. You can't see any downside to this, can you? A little girl who's just received a tiara that's more valuable than anything in the kingdom, probably. What could possibly go wrong? So another day, this guy, the monk, goes on his alms round, and the house is deserted. Nobody's there. He gets a little bit worried. Like, uh-oh, what's going on here? So he asks the neighbors and discovers that the entire family has been arrested and thrown in prison. Something about the business of this tiara that they must have stolen. So he goes to the king, and the king receives him very beautifully. The king is a believer. And the monk is sitting there chatting with the king and asks, well, do you know about such and such family? And the king says, yes, they were thieves. They had a tiara that was better than anything in my harem. Don't know where they got it. And the monk said, king, great king, can you not imagine where they might have gotten such a thing? And in that moment, the monk willed that every object in the entire room turned to gold. Every object in the room turned to gold. This is presented as a true story in the Vinaya. I don't know. It sounds like a folktale, but this is there. This wasn't just in front of the king. This is in front of the king and his entire entourage. You can't possibly see any problem with that, can you? You can't see, like, what could possibly go wrong? Just because you just demonstrated extraordinary psychic power to a whole lot of people who are in a position to blare it around the whole world. What could possibly go wrong? Right? So they were very impressed. And the king goes, Yes, Venerable Sir, I actually can imagine another way they got this tiara and the family was released. Well, then what happened after that is why it's in the Venia, because see, people, the Buddha explained about giving. If you give to a male or female monk with faith in the Sangha, that you're thinking of the entire Sangha, it's a very powerful giving. But people don't tend to think like that. People think, I want to give to an individual who's already fully accomplished. Now, for the benefit of the Sangha, you need to feed the newbies who are still, their robes are still falling off as they're walking down the street. Like, you need to give to everybody, right? Equally. But that's not how people think. So the word has gone out that there's a monk who actually turned everything in the king's reception room gold. Then people went, a real one. This is one to give to. So they're giving him honey, the 5 tonics. There were monks who were not doing well with the eating before noon rule, and they were getting kind of yellowy and dry skinned, and they just weren't doing well at all. So the Buddha considered what foods he could pull out of the food category that the monks could eat that would sustain them and help them not be dealing with this situation. You see, the medical lore of the day was Ayurvedic medicine, which is still practiced. And I don't know much about Ayurvedic medicine, but I know enough that I think that the description of what the monks were going through, like the dry skin and all this, is when there's too much wind element in the body. And so what they need are certain kinds of foods that would calm the body and kind of calm and cool it. And so that happens to be what these 5 things that the Buddha said. Okay, we have 5 foods that are considered medicine: sesame oil, honey, ghee, curds, and molasses. So monks, you can have any of these 5 day or night, and you can just store them. You can keep them. So food cannot be stored by the rule. Food cannot be eaten after noon, and you have to receive it at dawn, and you don't keep it and you don't eat it the next day. Like, that's because we're supposed to be beggars every day. That's how we're supposed to be doing it. So these 5 medicinal tonics, the Buddha made an exception to. You can keep them anytime, which is how I had my little snack tonight, because it was either those tonics or things that monks in the interim have said, yeah, that's close enough, we'll count it as the tonics, or being part of permanent medicines. There's certain things that are permanent medicines, like, I don't know, ginger root, for example, tea, coffee. These are medicines that are good for the life of the product that you can just keep. But these 5 foods that are tonics, they could have, and at that time they could keep them indefinitely, like any other medicine. People were giving massive amounts of ghee, sesame oil, honey, curds, and molasses to this monk. He's living by himself. He's one monk, and they're giving massive, like cartloads of these, because they want the good karma of doing it, and they get the good karma of doing it. But what's he going to do with it? So he became what they call a receiver, a monk who gets lots of stuff, who passes it on to the other monks. So to the nearest monastery, he would send all of this large quantity of stuff. So there's still a limit to what those monks could consume. So they had these large vats of honey and ghee and oil. Like, this stuff was valuable. It was not stuff that was all that easy to get in that economy, and highly valuable things, like what wealthy people would have. And so the monks have massive quantities of it because they can't use it fast enough. And then there were rats running all around the place, licking at it and wanting it too. And lay people would tour the monastery and they're like, you're living like kings. Why do you have all of these huge quantities of this valuable stuff? So then the Buddha said, you can keep these 5 things only for 6 nights. 7th day, you have to be done with it. And that's why it's in the rules of the monks. All starts with the tiara. So all that to say, wouldn't you think that an enlightened person would say, maybe if I do this, there could be some consequences? But perfection doesn't mean perfection of social skills at all. And it doesn't mean perfection in not hurting other people's feelings. People seriously stub their hearts. There was an image someone gave me one time of, how did they put it? Like waves breaking on rocks. Like people break their hearts on other people. Like somebody could be enlightened and people just come to them and break their hearts on them. But it's not the enlightened person's fault. It's just people get their feelings hurt. But the one thing people are absolutely certain of is that an enlightened person would never hurt my feelings. Go around, just poll people, just test them, ask them. That's the one thing they are absolutely certain of. An enlightened person will never, ever hurt my feelings. Good luck with that. The lay teachers are really smooth. Some of them are really, really smooth. I don't know what they're like behind closed doors. But they don't ruffle those egos. They're telling people what people want to hear. Like people, or people who are not just trying to please people. So enlightened and unenlightened, but on a good path, might tell people things that are very true that they needed to hear. They didn't want to hear. So, so again, would you want an enlightened person to be burdened with the necessity of cleaning up how they speak all the time? It's a mercy. It is merciful to people if they do, but it's not their job. Their job is to overcome all their inner hurt, and they've done it. They have no more inner hurt. They're good. They're happy. They can't be brought down by anything. There was a monk. Oh, boy, if I can tell this in just a couple of seconds. Long ago, when I was still a laywoman, I did some legal work for a monk who was in big trouble, and he was a leader of this whole community. And there was this one monk of the whole entourage who used to say to me, that he's happy all the time. And I used to get kind of mad about that because I didn't think anybody should be happy all the time. And I just found it offensive, the whole idea that somebody could even think that you could be happy all the time, because I was a very, very cranky person. And the distance between me and someone being happy all the time was just such a huge gulf. It just made me mad. And the day came that he was going to have his day in court. And we'd set up kind of like a war room at a fancy hotel outside of downtown San Diego. But now we needed to shift all of these files and everything to I guess it was a hotel room right by the courthouse. I can't remember now, but we were shifting all this stuff, and the elevator wasn't working well, and we can't be late because we got to get everything right. Just like it was anxiety. Everybody's running around. Everybody's anxious. And I went up to that monk and I'm like, so you're happy now? And he goes, why not? Happy all the time. Wow. Wow. He was even happy then, like not knowing if his teacher was about to get thrown out of the country to the wolves in their home country. Wow. That was very impressive to me. Why not? Happy all the time. Okay, so I think that's the talk I wanted to give.